Los Angeles, early 1940s, late afternoon. The Production Code Administration offices sit quietly above the street, insulated from traffic noise, insulated from applause, insulated from money. Inside one narrow conference room, the air is dry and still. Venetian blinds cut the sunlight into thin horizontal lines across the table. Dust hangs in those lines, unmoving. A clock ticks, but no one looks at it. Howard Hughes is already seated. Not slouched, not impatient. Relaxed in the way only someone used to winning can be relaxed, one arm draped casually along the back of the chair, a faint smile resting where a challenge usually lives. He has made jokes like this before, they usually land. Joseph Breen sits opposite him. Breen doesn't mirror the posture, he sits upright, hands folded, jacket buttoned, his face is unreadable, not stern, not hostile, just settled, as if the outcome has already been decided somewhere else. A third man, an assistant, barely noticeable, stands near the wall with a legal pad, pen hovering but not moving. Hughes breaks the silence. He chuckles lightly, the sound controlled, rehearsed, casual, a joke about morality, about how audiences can handle more than the censors think, about how the country has bigger problems than what appears on a screen. It's the kind of joke that usually loosens rooms. This one doesn't. No laughter. No correction. No warning. Breen doesn't respond at all. Instead, he reaches down, unhurried, and places a thick folder onto the table between them. The sound isn't loud, just paper meeting wood. But the room changes instantly. You can almost feel the temperature drop, not physically but socially. The way a space tightens when everyone understands something irreversible has just happened. Hughes looks at the folder. Not inside it, just at it. The smile fades, but only slightly, a professional adjustment. He's been challenged before, he expects negotiation, pushback, maybe a threat he can buy his way around. Breen still hasn't spoken. That's the unsettling part. The Production Code Administration doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need to. By the early 1940s, everyone in Hollywood understands the rules, even if they pretend not to. No studio releases a film without the PCA's approval. No seal means no distribution. No distribution means a finished film becomes an expensive paperweight. Careers have stalled here, quietly, efficiently. Hughes knows this. But Hughes also believes something else, that money, persistence, and audacity eventually overwhelm resistance. They usually do. Breen finally speaks. Not sharply. Not defensively. Almost kindly. He says the folder contains the objections. Not suggestions. Not notes. Objections. He explains briefly that the issues are structural, moral, unfixable without fundamental changes. He mentions distribution partners, regional bans, the likelihood that major theaters will refuse bookings. He doesn't say we will stop this film. He says this film will not move. There's a difference. And Hughes hears it. Howard Hughes built planes faster than governments. He financed films no one else would touch. He had walked into rooms like this his entire life and watched them bend. But this room isn't bending. Because Breen isn't opposing Hughes. He's ignoring him. That's where the fear creeps in. Not fear of punishment, but fear of irrelevance. Hughes leans forward slightly now, the chair creaks, he opens the folder. Inside, typed pages, marked passages, specific citations, not emotional objections, procedural ones, legal ones, social ones, the kind that don't care who you are. Each page represents another door quietly closing. Hughes flips one page, then another. Breen watches not closely, just enough. The assistant by the wall finally writes something down. Hughes tries again. A softer angle, he mentions edits, compromises, a willingness to adjust language, scenes, framing. He suggests solutions without fully offering them, still assuming leverage. Breen listens without interrupting. When Hughes finishes, Breen nods once. Then says something simple. Even with revisions, the concerns remain. The seal will not be issued in its current form. No anger. No emphasis. No finality in tone. Just fact. This is the moment Hughes realizes something is different. Not that he's lost yet. But that this isn't a fight. There will be no dramatic refusal, no public clash, no appeal to higher authority. The PCA doesn't escalate. It waits. And waiting in Hollywood is lethal. The silence stretches. The clock ticks louder now. Hughes sits back again, slower this time. His eyes return to the folder, then to Breen. He studies the man, perhaps for the first time, not as an obstacle but as a gate. A gate that doesn't care how loudly you knock. What makes this moment dangerous isn't what Breen says. It's what he doesn't. He doesn't threaten Hughes' reputation. He doesn't mention past controversies. He doesn't reference Hughes' influence. Because the PCA doesn't trade in humiliation. It trades in permission. And permission, once withheld, doesn't argue. Hughes closes the folder. The sound echoes softly in the small room. He doesn't stand yet, neither does Breen. No one declares victory. But everyone understands where the power sits. And for the first time in a long while, Howard Hughes has encountered something money doesn't soften. Silence. This meeting will not appear in newspapers, no memo will leak, no transcript will survive. But its consequences will. Because what happened here wasn't a censorship dispute. It was a demonstration. A reminder that in Hollywood's golden age, the most frightening power didn't belong to studios, stars, or tycoons. It belonged to the people who could calmly say no. And never raise their voice. Hughes leaves the building without argument. That in itself is unusual. No raised voice echoes down the hallway, no demand for escalation, no instruction barked at an assistant. He walks out the way men do when they understand that pushing further will only make things worse. Outside, Los Angeles continues as if nothing happened. Cars pass, sunlight glints off windshields. Somewhere nearby, a studio lot is filming a scene meant to look effortless. But Hughes carries the folder with him. Not for reference. For weight. What follows isn't immediate retaliation. There are no phone calls warning studios to choose sides, no angry editorials, no public dispute about censorship. The Production Code Administration doesn't operate that way. Its power works best when it remains invisible. And invisibility creates a particular kind of pressure, one that doesn't confront you directly but rearranges the world around you until resistance becomes impractical. Within days, Hughes' distribution partners begin asking careful questions. Not aggressive ones. Not accusatory. Just cautious. Has the code been satisfied? Are revisions underway? Is there a timeline for approval? Each question is framed as logistical. None of them mention Breen, none of them mention refusal. But the implication is clear: without the seal, everything stops. Contracts don't dissolve loudly, they simply stall. Hughes considers options. He always does. Appeal to the studios, they rely on the code themselves. Open defiance would make him radioactive. Quiet resistance might buy time, but time favors the PCA. They can wait longer than any production budget. Public pressure? Risky. Audiences don't rally around films they've never seen, and the code has cultivated a reputation for moral guardianship that makes dissent sound suspect. Legal action? Futile. The PCA isn't a government agency, it's an agreement. A collective refusal is perfectly lawful. The brilliance of the system reveals itself here. It doesn't punish. It withholds. Inside the PCA offices, nothing changes. Breen doesn't follow up. No reminders are sent. No concessions offered. Silence becomes policy. The assistant's legal pad fills with notes from other meetings, other objections, other folders. Hughes' project becomes just one more file, quietly immobilized. The pressure intensifies not through confrontation, but through absence. Phone calls go unanswered longer. Meetings are postponed. Commitments are described as pending. And slowly, subtly, Hughes feels the edges of his influence blur. Not disappear. Blur. That's worse. Psychologically, this is unfamiliar terrain. Hughes is accustomed to resistance. He thrives on it. Resistance means engagement. It means leverage is still being negotiated. Silence means the negotiation has ended without him. And worse, it means the system doesn't feel obligated to explain itself. He revisits the folder. Again and again. The objections are precise, cold, impersonal, each one cites precedent, regional sensibilities, the risk of undermining public confidence. There's no malice in the language. That's what makes it effective. Moral certainty doesn't argue. It doesn't threaten. It simply excludes. Hughes begins to understand the deeper message Breen delivered without saying it. The code isn't interested in winning. It's interested in consistency. Inconsistency beats power when power relies on momentum. Around town, rumors start, quiet ones. Not about the content of the film. About its status. Still waiting on approval. Stuck in review. Complications with the code. In Hollywood, these phrases are reputational stains. They suggest instability, risk, delay. Investors notice. So do collaborators. This is how consequences spread without ever naming their source. No one says Joseph Breen blocked this. They say the code hasn't cleared it. That distinction protects the institution while isolating the individual. It's bureaucratic insulation. And it works. Hughes considers compromise. Real compromise this time. Not cosmetic edits but structural concessions, scene removals, dialogue softened, themes redirected. Each change feels like a trade. Not just of content but of authority. He's no longer deciding what the film is. He's negotiating what it's allowed to be. And yet, even as revisions are discussed, the silence continues. Breen reviews. Breen considers. Breen delays. Never rudely. Never dismissively. Just enough to remind Hughes that initiative no longer belongs to him. What's happening here isn't censorship in the dramatic sense. It's containment. The code doesn't need to defeat Hughes, it only needs to slow him until urgency becomes concession. And urgency always arrives eventually. Budgets age. Attention shifts. Opportunity windows close. Momentum decays. The fear that sets in isn't fear of punishment. It's fear of irrelevance. Of becoming the man with a finished film no one can show. Of discovering that power, once absolute, can be rendered conditional by a single administrative seal. This is the lesson Hollywood rarely articulates but always remembers. Studios rise and fall. Stars burn bright and fade. Money floods in and drains out. But permission remains. Held quietly. Exercised selectively. Denied without spectacle. Hughes hasn't lost yet. But he now understands the terrain. He's not fighting a man. He's confronting a system designed to outlast him. And systems don't blink. They wait. What happens next won't be decided in that room on Sunset Boulevard. It will unfold in choices made under pressure. In edits agreed to reluctantly. In silence tolerated longer than intended. In power recalibrated without announcement. And when the outcome finally arrives, it will feel less like defeat. And more like a realization. That even the richest man in the room can be outmatched. Not by force, but by restraint. The realization doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in fragments. A postponed call that never gets rescheduled. A distributor who suddenly needs clarity before committing. A studio lawyer who starts choosing words more carefully than before. None of it is dramatic. That's the cruelty of it. Howard Hughes doesn't lose his power in a single moment, he watches it become conditional. Eventually, revisions are submitted. Not because Hughes agrees with the objections, but because the alternatives have narrowed. The edits are careful, calculated, scenes trimmed, dialogue softened, intent blurred just enough to pass. The folder returns to the PCA. It sits on Joseph Breen's desk among dozens of others. And once again, nothing happens quickly. This is where the emotional weight settles in. Not anger. Not humiliation. Something quieter. The understanding that no amount of wealth can accelerate a process designed to resist urgency. Breen does not gloat. He does not threaten. He does not remind Hughes of the earlier meeting. He simply continues doing his job. That's what makes him terrifying. When approval finally comes partial, conditional, it feels less like a victory and more like permission to breathe again. The seal is granted with stipulations. Distribution resumes. The machinery restarts. But something fundamental has changed. Hughes never publicly acknowledges the encounter. There is no interview where he reflects on censorship, no recorded grievance against the PCA. Silence becomes his response. And silence in this case is an admission. Because men like Hughes don't stay quiet unless they've learned something worth remembering. The fallout isn't immediate, but it's lasting. Hughes becomes more cautious, not in ambition but in exposure. He learns where power actually lives in Hollywood, not always in studios, not always in money. Sometimes in filing cabinets, in procedures, in men who never need to raise their voice. Joseph Breen continues his work for years after. He blocks scripts. He delays releases. He reshapes narratives before audiences ever see them. Most people never know his name. That's the point. The PCA's power is effective precisely because it doesn't seek recognition. It operates in the negative space, what never appears, what never opens, what quietly disappears. For Hughes, the encounter leaves a residue. A reminder that audacity has limits. That momentum can be stopped without confrontation. That silence can overpower spectacle. He never again walks into a censorship meeting expecting to win with charm alone. The joke that didn't land stays with him. Hollywood too absorbs the lesson. Quietly, producers learn to preempt objections, writers learn to self-edit, studios learn that the most dangerous no is the one delivered politely with documentation. Fear doesn't need volume. It needs structure. Decades later, the meeting isn't remembered as a scandal. There's no headline for it. No photograph. No transcript. But its effect lingers in how the industry behaves. In how power hides behind process. In how resistance is absorbed rather than crushed. In how the loudest figures are often checked by the calmest ones. Howard Hughes went on to build planes, make films, disappear into isolation. Joseph Breen went home every night to a normal life, having quietly decided what millions would never see. That contrast is the story. Not hero versus villain. Not freedom versus censorship. But something colder. Because what happened in that room wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. That in Hollywood's golden age, fear didn't always come from gangsters, studios, or headlines. Sometimes it came from a man who said very little. Set a folder on the table. And waited.